Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed. If you think you might be one of us, my advice is turn away while you still can. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth. Try to live a normal life. Because once you know what you are, they'll sense it too. And they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Chris Amick, and I'll be your host for today's episode. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, we invite members of the Cinema Club to be co-hosts for the episode who will choose the movie or television show and join us on the podcast to talk about that film or show. Tonight, I am with Tim and Ruby, and we're covering Percy Jackson and the Olympians, episodes 1 through 4 tonight. Great to have you back on, Tim. It's been a minute.
Yeah, buddy. I don't think it's been too long because we did the Spider-Verse episode, 2 or 3 months ago?
Was it that long ago?
I think it was September, so it wasn't too long ago.
Okay, that's fair. It feels like forever ago, though, now that we're in 2024.
Well, considering how much podcasting you do, I bet it feels like forever.
I think in total, I was on 30 episodes last year. I didn't host all of those, but that's a valid point. But yeah, great to have you back, man. I'm excited to be covering a TV show for the first time with you in this format. And then Ruby, awesome to have you on the podcast for the first time.
Honored to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And just for the listeners out there, I did want to ask you both a little bit about your backgrounds when it comes to Rick Riordan and the Percy Jackson books, movies, and now the television series.
All right. My history with the Percy Jackson books, I read the entire series when I was 14 or 15. I don't remember the exact age, but somewhere in that time frame of my life. And I think I might have reread the first book after I read the entire series once after that. I don't remember if I did or not. I do remember distinctly reading the graphic novel for a college course as I was an English major and thought I wanted to teach. So I took a lot of literature courses, and that happened to be one of the books that we read for my course. It wasn't that loyal of an adaptation. They cut out a lot of stuff in the graphic novel, so I wasn't that big of a fan of it. But ever since then, I have not read any of the other Rick Riordan books. I'm not familiar with any of the Kane Chronicles, the Heroes of Olympus series that took place after the Percy Jackson books. All I've read are these 5 books and what I've seen of the first few episodes of the TV show. And before I started the TV show, I reread the first novel just to kind of get a refresher and also relive some childhood nostalgia. It's fresh in my mind, and it was a wonderful reread.
I read the first 2 books when I was around, I think, 8, and I remembered them pretty well, and I really liked them. I never continued on with the series until last year. I reread the whole main series, and I have not continued on with the series. I plan to. I haven't read all the other ones, but I've seen a lot of spoilers, and then I never officially watched them, but I did see basically the whole movie through clips and stuff. So I know the dark side of the fandom a bit.
I forgot the movies existed, to be honest.
I'm so sorry to remind you.
I never watched them. I forgot that they existed altogether.
I really enjoyed the original books. Also read those as a teen, like you did, Tim. And then I think I read maybe 1 or 2 of the other books, but never really got into it. When it comes to the movies, I always was hoping for something different when I walked out of those. But yeah, I was definitely excited when they put out there that Disney was producing a television series on the first book. because I felt that television series might be a really great way to adapt this story. I was having conversations with the both of you individually about the TV series. And then, yeah, from there, both were down to cover it on the podcast. And I was like, hey, why the hell not? Watching the show every week anyway. Might as well.
What's one more episode on the podcast? Am I right?
Exactly. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be diving into it with the both of you. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your backgrounds when it comes to the world of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. As far as formatting for the episode, not going to break it down on a per episode basis since we have 4 episodes to cover today. Just more of an open discussion format for the show. But what are you both thinking so far?
I think it's a pretty good adaptation as a whole. In terms of the plot, I think they've done a good job adapting it. Obviously, when you adapt something from a book to a movie or something, there's obviously some things that you're going to leave out. But I understand that because for time constraints, and there's also some things that for a book don't necessarily work in a movie per se. I understand with some changes that may or may not be made. But I think they're doing a good job because they're not committing the cardinal sin of a book adaptation is adding a whole bunch of bullshit that you didn't have in the book into the movie. I understand that you cut some stuff, but as long as you still keep within what happened in the books, I think that you're doing a good job. And as far as I can tell, they haven't added a whole ton of bullshit that didn't happen in the book. I think that because Rick Riordan is an executive producer, that's helping with that. However, I still have my fair share of criticisms with the show. There's plenty of good stuff that the show is doing. There's plenty of bad stuff that I'm not as thrilled with. But overall, I would say it's a solid adaptation. And yeah, I'd say people should watch it.
On that note, the first 2 episodes, and then actually next week's episode 5 is written by, at least partially, the author Rick Riordan. So that's always a great sign as well.
Oh, really? I didn't realize the first 2 episodes were written by the author.
Yeah,
That
they
would
definitely.
explain why I like those 2 episodes more than 3 and 4.
Yeah, I had heard he was writing most, if not at least some of the episodes as well. I didn't realize he hadn't written the last 2, which I didn't like those as much. But as an author, you can go back and maybe change some things that you wish you would have. And I felt wrong criticizing it, but at the same time, it was like, you're changing stuff, Rick. I don't like this as much. I would agree with Tim as an overall. I think it's a great show so far. I'm really enjoying it. But also, the things that stick out to me the most are my criticisms of it, even though I'm loving it. There's
Yes.
just little nitpicks here and there that stick out to me sharply. And those are the most blaring things in my mind about it.
Yes.
It sounds like all 3 of us were at least excited that Rick Riordan was so involved with this series. That's been a positive sign leading up to the series, and then sounds like positive impact for all 3 of us as well. But what isn't working?
Okay. My biggest issue with the show so far is Annabeth's personality. I'm perfectly okay with them doing a colorblind casting. In the book, she's got bleached blonde hair. I'm totally cool with making the actress black. That is not my issue. I understand there's plenty of racists out there who are making a big deal out of that. I am not one of them, but she's way too hostile in the show. I understand that she and Percy aren't best friends yet, but she's way too mean to him, and that is not what her personality in the book was in the slightest.
I'm so glad you said that because, like, she definitely had an attitude problem in the books, but it's just raised to such a level in the series. In the book, they were constantly butting heads, but like they were working together, they were friends. And in this, especially Annabeth is very hostile, and I'm not quite sure what exactly the decision for that was. I think again the actress is doing great, and I'm very glad they casted her. I don't know if it was a writing choice, but I'm just not quite sure why they decided to go in that direction of making her so angry.
Something I really hadn't pinned down when watching the show myself, but I think a really good example of that is in the latest episode when they're on the bus and she asks Percy and Grover, what kind of snacks do you guys want? I'm going to go into the gas station. And that was definitely, like you're both saying, more of a hostile type of exchange.
Okay, the moment that got me was after they went and captured the flag. Annabeth is just doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, she just shoves Percy in the water. I get you can't do everything exactly like it was in the book, but Percy won and captured the flag by defeating Aunt Clarice and just ended up in the river. Annabeth didn't shove him into the river. That's something a bully would do. And say what you will, Annabeth is not a bully in the books. And she's, you know what, like, let's just shove you in the water for no reason. What the hell, man?
I have to say that scene made me so mad, and actually I had to go rewatch it. That scene was done better in the movies in a way, because even though he's fighting Annabeth in the movies, it was done better. Where again, like Tim said, it was so frustrating because he's fighting Clarice in the water, and that's how he breaks her spear and everything. Because you're seeing this kid who just got to this camp 2 days ago and is doing all of these acrobatic moves, and he breaks this spear of a daughter of the god of war, and you're like, whoa. Versus in the books, it's an explanation because he's in the water. That's how he has this strength. That's how he's able to do this. And then his cuts heal and he gets claimed. And then you see that Annabeth was watching him. Versus in this, Clarice, who is the bully, just walks away and she's all, ugh. And then Annabeth was like, my plan didn't work. Guess I'm going to be all mad and shove you in the river. And it just didn't flow very well. It didn't fit with the
I see what you did
characters
there.
that I had known. And it was just
My man.
frustrating watching.
Okay, but in addition to that, I agree with every word you just said, but at the same time, the show also played it off like Annabeth knew that Percy was the son of Poseidon. That's also partially why she did it as well, because the look on her face was like, I have a hunch. Let's push you in the water. No,
I mean,
nobody knew he was the son of Poseidon. But yet the show played it off like she knew he was going to be the son of Poseidon.
in all fairness, like, what else would he be, really? But at the same time, you wouldn't have that in your head as a demigod because you're forbidden. What's going on with these toilets? The plumbing's messed up. But yeah, it played it off where everyone seemed like they thought they knew who he was already. And it was this big shock in the books. And so it's very underwhelming, actually.
Yes.
What are your thoughts been on the other characters and how the writing is reflecting them?
I will say, out of all of the actors casted so far, Grover is just spot on for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know if it's the actor, if it's both, but his mannerisms, his attitude, his personality, everything is just spot on Grover for me. And I'm just so glad that his character is getting so much love and everything because he's just perfect for me in this TV show.
Of the main power trio, I would agree Grover is the best written and best cast and most accurate to the book adaptation. I will agree with that 100%. However, the character that works best for me is Dionysus.
I had that in my
Watching,
notes. Yeah.
Watching Abed from Community being the god of wine, I don't know why, but
It
it
worked.
just hit me really well, and I freaking love him.
I thought it was a really good casting too when I saw who they casted. At first I was in shock and then I was like, this is gonna be great.
It was funny for me watching the show because I had not seen who was cast as Dionysus before watching the show. But in episode 2, when we get introduced to this character,
Yeah.
as Percy and Grover are going through that building, I was remembering, oh, I think they meet Dionysus at least sometime pretty soon here. And I shit you not, was the actor that came to mind. And I was like, I wonder, this would be perfect casting if they threw this guy in here as Dionysus. And they did. So that totally made episode 2 for me. Because I had never imagined him in that role previously. But real time watching the show come to life, I was like, oh, shit, that'd be perfect. And then sure enough, seconds later, he's there. And I'm like, oh, yes, this is awesome.
I did the scene they added with him where he's pretending to be Percy's father. I thought that was pretty funny. It was very smart too, because
that was
Percy's
good.
just so confused, the poor thing.
Yeah.
But speaking of Percy, I'd like to talk about his character.
Go for it.
I'm really glad they casted Walker, but I'm a little disappointed, and I think it's with the writing of his character. I understand the difficulty of getting him from page to screen because a lot of what happens is in his head, but the stuff he says is just hilarious. And I knew Walker was going to be a super great fit because I'd seen him in The Adam Project, which I watched a couple days after it was announced he was going to play Percy. And I was just like, oh, he's perfect. And then I don't know if you guys watched that Kraft mac and cheese commercial he did. It's hilarious. You have to go see it. I was like, this is Percy. And then when I was watching the Percy TV show, I wasn't sure if maybe it was because it was rated PG or if it was the writing, but something was feeling off about it. I think he's an incredible actor. I think he did an amazing job. I wasn't sure if it was the way his lines were being written or just the difficulty of getting all he was thinking onto screen, but he just felt a little off to me, and I'm not sure why.
Hi there, this is Chris again, editor Chris, I should say. And I just wanted to take a moment in between some of the conversation happening today around Percy Jackson and the Olympians to share that if you are enjoying the content that we are putting out on the Cinema Club, or maybe even if this is your first time listening in on the Cinema Club, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show and if you are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on the Cinema Club's website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club to keep the show running and growing. It definitely does take a few subscriptions to use software and editing programs for these episodes on the Cinema Club. So any generosity financially is definitely appreciated. With that, let's jump back into the conversation on Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
Okay, I agree. There is something off. Mostly, I think my biggest gripe with that, and also my biggest gripe spews into our discussion with Annabeth as well, is Percy Jackson's got a very distinct sense of humor, and that is not being portrayed that well in the show. Percy's a wisecracker. He's making jokes and witty comments, and we haven't really gotten anything except for the first episode with, yeah, and the Minotaur's still wearing underpants. It's
I
the
will say
old
the Jesus comment got me laughing pretty hard.
for sure. But at the same time, though, that's the only real wisecrack we've gotten from Percy so far. And that's also part of the reason why I am also having issues with Annabeth's personalities, because part of the appeal of the books is the back and flow of Percy's wisecracks and her telling him to shut up with and knock off the wisecracks. And that's part of the group dynamic. But we don't have that because Percy's not cracking jokes. And that also throws off the dynamic with Annabeth.
That explains it. I was struggling trying to figure out what it was. I was like, what is it that's throwing me off? But
Yeah, and it would have been interesting, and I agree it's probably difficult because a lot of the book revolves around his thoughts and processing everything as it goes along, but that's very difficult to do on screen. And I think the best portrayal of that type of narrative on screen is Chinatown with Jack Nicholson. I don't know if either of you have ever seen it, but the entire movie, Jack Nicholson is narrating the entire movie in his head.
would have been perfect, especially since it opens up with his narration.
Yes, but Chinatown's also more of a murder mystery and not as much of an action fantasy series. So that would have been a bit more difficult to portray, I think. Because, like we said before, a lot of his narration happens in the middle of the battles, and him narrating what's going on during the fight sequences would have been very distracting. So I understand why they didn't do it. But in between fight sequences, I think maybe it could have worked.
I think what would have worked very well, and I just thought of it now, is because anyone who's read the books knows that at the beginning of every chapter is Percy being Percy. He always starts it off because they want to be a half-blood. He goes into this whole thing about how it sucks. It would have been great to just start every episode maybe with him narrating it. I was just actually rereading the Golden Gateway Arch chapter because that episode made me mad. And the next chapter literally starts with, I wish I could have told you I had some revelation, but really I was just going all the way down. If that's how each episode started, kind of how the first one did with his thoughts, I feel like that also would have been able to get us into Percy's head more.
Okay, that's actually a really great idea. And I completely agree. And that would have also given the audience a clue of, oh yeah, he has actually got a sense of humor. And I feel like that's one of the things the show is missing is the sense of humor from the books. Because like I said, the Jesus comment that you mentioned and the Minotaur still wearing underpants are the only two like real jokes and grasp from the books that we've gotten in the show.
It's very interesting that you guys both have very similar experiences with the show when it comes to the main character. I know it's been about a year since I reread the books personally, and so I wasn't as in tune or looking for those more detail-oriented things.
Yeah.
Will say, echoing both your thoughts, really enjoying Walker Scobell as the star of the show. I think he definitely has all the tools to really have a bright future in acting. And then Also, really love the actors portraying Annabeth and Grover as well. I like that they've changed things up a little bit when it comes to casting as a whole in the show.
I'm glad that they chose, especially Rick, because he was a big part of casting as well, who they thought would be the best for each character, no matter who they were. And I'm glad they decided to go with that. I did want to say one more thing about Percy's character, which is I'm having some difficulties with some of the writing choices in it. And one is Percy's development, character wise, his sort of arc, where he starts off this series actually really wanting his dad's approval. He wants to see his dad again. He misses him. He wants to know who he is. While he's on this quest, he's constantly thinking about him and wondering, "Well, if I do this, what will my dad think?" And then as the series continues, he just gets more and more fed up with the gods until finally he's just, "I'm done with you guys," for good reasons. And we start this series with Percy already in that very angry, very fed up spot, which is also fair considering his circumstances. But if this series continues, which I hope it does, if he's just going to get angrier or what's going to happen there.
Indeed. Speaking of other characters, not necessarily just Percy, I don't think that they've done a good enough job developing the smaller characters. Like, I don't think we've spent enough time with Luke personally. And quite frankly, I don't think we spent enough time with the other campers as well. My real gripe is I think that the show is too hell bent, no pun intended, too hell bent on getting to the quest that we're not spending enough time getting into the Greek mythology aspects of the show. And whenever a god appears, like, okay, who's this? And all the gods are supposed to be like the mean big baddies, just feel like your stereotypical monster of the week from Star Trek, as opposed to something with any meaning, if that's making sense at all. And because we haven't spent enough time learning with the mythology and the Greek characters, like all the other side characters, we don't really care about them when we should.
I completely agree with this, actually. My biggest gripe with the series, I was trying to figure out, I'm like, is it the writing? Is it the characters? It's the pacing of it, where they don't actually start the quest till about halfway through the entire book, where that first half is just getting to know the campers, getting to know the myths, getting to know this whole world. And instead, we are constantly with these series just being pushed towards this goal. And especially for me, just these monsters, they did not feel intimidating in any way. I think it's part of the way they were presented, where in the book, you get these lulls of safety almost. And it's supposed to show that monsters can be anywhere because then you start to get this unease, but you're not sure why until a monster shows up. And with this, it's very plain, very obvious. They usually have some sort of monologue. They're not really trying to hide it. And then it's just on to the next one. And we don't really get any time for any of the characters, even like the main cast, whatever development is happening, pushed together in these little scenes. And then all of these other side characters, Sharon, Clarice, Luke, characters that are very pivotal to the rest of the series, you don't get really any information on them. You haven't gotten any information really on Luke and Annabeth's relationship a lot, and that's very important to the series. The stepfather, I was disappointed with how he was presented because, I mean, he was really abusive in the books. And with this one, he's just like a loser. The only character I feel like we have gotten expanded on is Sally, Percy's mom, which I am glad that they did decide to show more of her because we didn't get to see a lot of her. But every other character I feel like has been majorly sidelined, even the main cast.
I would agree with that. And also, one of the big deals in the first book is names have power, and we're not getting to experience that at all. So people are just throwing around names like crazy. And that's a minutia detail, but that's been bugging me as well.
Both really great points, honestly. And I think next week we're maybe meeting Ares. So that'll be the god or the villain of the week. But I am interested to see how they handle Ares in the television series. If he's going to be as dark, maybe as harsh as he is in the books, because he's a pretty badass character in the books. So I'm interested to see how that plays out with more of the PG rated television series.
The
Right.
monsters, I'm not disenjoying them. Medusa, for example, I think the way all the monsters are being presented, particularly with the Medusa's story, she has
Hello,
two.
Percy. I'm Medusa.
Yeah, she has two different storylines in Greek mythology itself. One is kind of a victim, and one of those has become more popular over the last decade or so. And so I understood why they decided to go with that storyline. It was so completely different from the book. Medusa, like that scene is one of my favorite scenes in the book where I dressed up as Medusa for Halloween that year. And it was a really good costume where they have been stumbling through the woods for days. They come across this burger place and it's this sweet old lady who's helping them out and making them burgers. And just the longer you're in the scene, the more easy you start to feel. And then it's revealed and you have no idea it's Medusa. And it's this really intense scene. And then chopping her head off and then sending it to Olympus. It's like crazy. And then in this, it's so anticlimactic. I was so disappointed where she just walks out and she's like, I don't like bullies. I'm Medusa. Oh, hi, Percy. Me and your dad are exes. And I understood they were trying to make her character more appealing or maybe change it a bit, which I would have been fine with, but this scene just wasn't right. It didn't feel climactic. It didn't have any resounding emotion in me, and it just left me disappointed. And I felt that with a lot of the monsters so far, where like when he's fighting Mrs. Dodds, when he's fighting the Chimera, everything is just very anticlimactic. And like Tim said, it's because they're pushing this quest so much where you don't actually get all of this action. There's just no payoff for it.
Good points. I was going to ask you both. I remember Percy deciding to send Medusa's head to Olympus. I don't really remember Annabeth getting potential flack for it. Is that something that's in the books?
Nope. Annabeth receives no flack from it.
I know the Chimera is able to get into the Golden Way Arch, but I don't think it's for flack. I don't know what it is. I think it's just that the gods are like, we're not interfering with this. I don't think it's like a personal hit at
Yeah,
Annabeth or
because
anything
in the
like that.
show,
Okay.
Annabeth says, oh, my mom's not happy with me because we sent the head to Olympus. She's not going to help us. In the book, they just go up to the Golden Arch. They don't involve Athena at all in the book.
Actually, I was really sad with that scene too, because Annabeth is just, I want to go look at the archway because they have 2 hours to kill. And they go look at it, and they're in this tram with this lady who has a pet chihuahua. And Percy, since he's 80, he's seen a million stuff a minute, and it's just said in passing, and then said in passing again. And then you see this little tiny, vicious, scrawny chihuahua turn into this big chimera, and it's freaky, it's scary. And then he jumps out of the Golden Way Arch. And I don't know if you didn't like it, Tim or Christopher, but I didn't like the scene as much. I thought it was lacking something. I've imagined him jumping out of that archway on screen like 100 times. And then it was his point of view. And it was just him like falling instead of jumping. I didn't like the change as much, but I still enjoyed the episode. I'm not trying to trash it. I still liked it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I agree. It was fairly anticlimactic. And I think that the fight seemed to last a lot longer in the book. And it seemed like they cut the fight short as well.
There wasn't very much fighting. in this
Exactly.
fight. He just lost.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I will say episode 4 for me personally has been my least favorite of the 4 released. And it almost makes it okay that it's the shortest too, I believe. So I'm like, oh, what else would they really have showed to us? Except maybe they could have potentially set up the introduction of Ares at the very end, and then we pick up with it on episode 5 next week. I personally have had a really good experience with episodes 1, 2, and 3. I really haven't had too much to nitpick about. Episode 4 for me was the episode, though, where a lot of the criticisms that you've both been sharing about the show as a whole, when it comes to the writing aspect, especially, those were items that I was definitely seeing and experiencing myself in episode 4 specifically.
Yeah. I feel like we've traffic showing up. Let's talk about something good that the show has done. One thing that I've actually enjoyed is the design of the monsters. Now, the monsters do look cheesy. I think that works for the show because it's not supposed to be taken too seriously. The presentation of the monsters, as Ruby said, is dumb, but overall, though, I really like the way the monsters are designed. and how they transition from human to monster has been done really well.
I think the CGI overall with everything, whether it's the water control with Percy or the trident above his head or the monsters, it's all been done very well and very realistic. And I think it also helps bring this world to life more. I also think the camp was done really well, just because Camp Half-Blood is just a staple in everyone's mind. And for me, I was always imagining some small summer camp in a log cabin, and then you have these huge Greek architecture, really cool cabins. And I thought that was just really great. And I really liked the camp's design a lot.
I will agree with that because in my mind, I basically just pictured North Star Camp. Chris will get a chuckle from that. But for the viewers that don't know, Ruby, did you go to North Star as a kid?
I did, yes.
Yeah, it's the summer camp that all three of us went to when we were in our teens. So I pictured North Star Camp, but with a bit more like cabins and such.
Yeah. So they've
Like,
remodeled it now.
yeah. But I agree. The camp looks very cool. It feels like Greek gods designed it, and I will agree with that. I want to visit it way more now in real
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, and the orange t-shirts. I really
Mhm.
appreciated that they were like, hey, we're gonna have these ugly orange t-shirts on
Yeah.
every single kid in the
I
show.
I heard they went through 152 different dyes to find the perfect orange for the t-shirts, which is
Yep.
crazy. And even watching it, you can see who's like a new camper versus an old camper, depending on how sun bleached their t-shirt is. Like Luke's t-shirt, it's way more sun bleached than a couple other newer Percy's. And that very small detail where like someone who went to a summer camp a lot would know, oh yeah, your like work t-shirt or something is gonna get completely ruined.
Holy shit.
And having different kids and different slightly off shades of orange, like you can see who's been here longest. And it was a really realistic thing in this very fantastical camp that as a summer camper just immediately drove into my mind. And it was really cool and funny to see.
That is a detail that just went right over my head. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, same here. I did not pick up on that, so that's great.
I will say probably my favorite thing about this series, I was just praying they would do this, is Riptide. I imagined the pen two different ways. One was like a really cool metal fountain pen, and the other was just like a 99-cent pen. And when it showed up as just the trashiest pen imaginable, I was so happy that they decided to go with that design because it was
Mhm.
perfect in my mind.
I also think the other reason they went with that design is that way if it breaks, they can get a new one very easily.
I was gonna talk about the critical reception of the show so far. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score with over 1,000 ratings is 85%, and a critical rating with 57 reviews is a 96%. So the majority of people are really enjoying the show, and it's largely been praised for its faithfulness to the source material, the world building, and the performances of the cast. I was going to ask you both. I know the show, from my understanding, is available both on Hulu and Disney Plus now. I've personally been watching on Disney Plus.
Sam.
All three of us. Okay.
Yeah.
I have been noticing they have the built-in commercial cuts for
Oh, I didn't
the
even
show.
notice that.
So
Oh,
I was
that
like,
makes so much more sense.
I also noticed that.
I was wondering, I was always like, what is going on here? That makes so much more sense now.
yeah, it was something I noticed, and I was like, oh yeah, Disney has the option where you can have commercials, and I have the option that has commercials on Hulu. So I was like, okay, this makes more sense why they have 4 or 5 commercial cuts per episode. But I definitely found that very interesting for a Disney show because I've been reviewing a few of these over the last year, and most of them did not have those commercial cuts built in like this show does.
I actually wanted to add one thing to that when you're talking about all of the perception of the show. I saw that it has become the second most searched streaming fantasy show. The only thing on top of it is Game of Thrones. It's like beaten out every other fantasy show, which I think, it's only been out a couple weeks, which is incredible. And I also saw someone make this comparison. If Harry Potter is like the millennials' obsession, Percy Jackson is the Gen Z's Harry Potter, basically, where
That's a fair comparison.
it has this huge staples of every person's childhood. It's how we have the Hunger Games, We have
Cool.
Harry Potter. We have all of these super big fans where everyone is predicting that each generation has, it's like Harry Potter, Hunger Games. This is going to be this generation's Percy Jackson huge TV show obsession. And I think so far it's doing a great job. I know I've been rather critical of it, but still, every time an episode ends, I can't believe I have to wait for the next episode because I'm enjoying it so much. As critical as I may be of it, I'm still loving it. And I think it's worthy of its praise.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, honestly, I've been pretty critical in the past of Disney Plus shows having incredibly short episodes. However, for Percy Jackson and the Olympians, I feel like the 30 to 40-minute episodes are honestly perfect for the story. And that may be due to me first reading the books where the story was broken up in chunks, like episodes are. But I
Yeah.
definitely wanted to ask you both how you're feeling about the runtime when it comes to telling the story.
Personally, as we already established, I feel like they're rushing the quest and not digging in deep enough. So if it means adding a bit more detail and a bit more mythology and pacing and maybe one or two more scenes from the book, then I would like longer episodes or maybe more episodes of the same length personally. But I understand it's what TV's become nowadays. You got to have 8 to 10 episodes at most. That's what TV shows are nowadays. You're not going to get your 24 episodes in a TV series for a season. It's just not what TV is these days. I get it. But at the same time, I would like the episodes to be a bit longer so they include more from the book because there's a couple important things that they've missed that I definitely think is going to bite them in the ass later.
I agree with Tim mostly on that. I honestly don't think the wide populace would mind just a couple episodes of them meandering about because they've packed a lot of action into these episodes where you could space it out and still have plenty of action each episode with just a little more pacing. And I'm still enjoying the episodes, but I wouldn't mind if they were a little longer.
Awesome. I appreciate those different takeaways from what we've seen so far. And I am curious with the last 4 episodes if they are going to potentially expand a little bit upon the runtime, just because I feel there's a lot to cover in 4 episodes if they're going to do the first whole book, especially action wise. Like, there's a lot of action that takes place in these last 4 episodes that I think it would definitely benefit the show if they are giving us around 45 minutes per episode at least to really flesh out some of the character development, especially between the trio that we're experiencing the story through.
I don't think they're halfway through the quest, and they've already cut out quite a few storylines. I don't know if anyone else remembers the storyline where Percy Jackson was a wanted felon for this entire quest, where he was like missing kid, and his stepdad was saying how he was like such a troubled kid and had all his problems with schools, and he's a wanted felon. People are like, he destroyed a bus, he ruined a train, he did all this stuff. They've completely cut that out, which understandably you can't have everything in it. But it's still, there's a lot to cover, and there's only 4 episodes left.
Okay, the episode we just finished, I Plunged to My Death. That chapter starts at page 197. The next chapter is I Become a Known Fugitive. The TV stations start picking up and he becomes more like national news in the next chapter. So I think we're going to see him become a fugitive and passing a TV clip with him with a wanted poster in the next episode. That's my guess.
Okay. I just know it
But-
was like missing posters for a while too.
Yeah, we didn't see any of the missing posters. Oh, actually, I think we did see one missing poster.
Did we? Okay, maybe I missed it. I could have missed it.
I could be wrong, but I think I saw a missing poster in the background. But yeah, we're halfway through and we're 3/5 way through the book.
But there's a lot that happens in that last bit.
There is. We'll hope for longer run times.
I think episode 5 is going to cover the introduction of Ares and then probably the love tunnel. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Ye-
I'm guessing how it's going to go is it starts when they meet Ares. It's going to be the love tunnel, which is the side quest Ares sends them on. And then it's going to be like the end where Ares sends them off, is how I'm guessing that is going to go, which again is not a lot. So unless they rush that as well, I'm guessing they're gonna have to cut out minor scenes, maybe. Not to spoil anything, but you still got the Lotus Hotel. You've still got that guy with the weird beds
Mhm.
store. You've still got the whole thing with Chiron and Hades and still just getting to the underworld and then
Hmm.
everything that comes after that. That last bit, it's a lot to cover. And since these episodes have already felt rushed, I'm just not sure how they're going to manage to get everything in it. And if they can't, it's just going to be interesting what they prioritize.
I did want to share, as we mentioned about Ares and the love tunnel. That isn't spoiler because that is included at the very end of episode 4.
Yes.
Don't come at me in the comments.
Come on, bro. Speaking of what they're going to do with the future, the other thing I'm very curious about how they're going to handle it because they just completely skipped over it. When Percy's still at Camp Half-Blood, they completely cut out the Hellhound attack.
Oh man,
That's
they
right,
did.
they did.
Okay, so hear me out. They very briefly brushed over the Oracle. And I'm not going to completely spoil what goes on, but don't forget about what the Oracle said. You will be
Important
betrayed by one who you call friend. And the Hellhound attack in Camp Half-Blood lets you know there's fuckery afoot because you should not be able to summon a Hellhound in Camp Half-Blood. And the one who you betray and call friend directly correlates to the Hellhound attack. And I'm not going to say more than that because I don't want to spoil too much, but they've cut that out. So how are they going to handle that part of the Oracle prophecy later on in the series? So I'm very curious to see what they do.
Another thing that they completely cut out. So I know we talked about how in the book, Percy and Annabeth are much closer and get along a lot better. And throughout this whole time, there's been some calmer bits in the book where they're trying to figure out who would have stolen the lightning bolt if it wasn't Percy, how they get the lightning bolt, how do they do all this stuff. He's trying to figure out who's going to betray him, why he got framed. And actually, in what would have been the 4th episode, the Arch part, when they're in there, they're talking about this and who could have gotten the lightning bolt. And they talk about how they're thinking it's Hades. And they talk about how Hades has the helm of darkness that makes him invisible, so that on Winter Solstice, he's able to go up and get the lightning bolt. And Annabeth confirms this because they got to go on like a field trip basically up there. And Percy starts thinking, he goes, Annabeth was up there and she has this invisible cap. And that is what kind of makes it more suspicion towards Annabeth versus just this we could never be friends sort of thing. And
Yeah.
it's just another thing they glossed over where it's why do we think it's Hades just because he's the brother stuck in the underworld where there's just a lot of and things cut out. I will say one thing I'm interested in, I want to hear other people's opinions on, is the depiction of Percy's dreams, where they are in the books, but the depiction of them is a bit different. I don't remember the figure being there with the lantern, because obviously there's the pit, which is depicted in
Yes.
the dreams, but the voice seems to be coming from the person with the lantern. Do we figure out who that person is? Because I'm a little confused who that person is.
I don't think we've been told who that figure is yet. I haven't had an issue with that so far. But then again, those scenes didn't stick with me as much as other scenes in the books did. So
Mhm.
that's a me problem.
Yeah.
But
think
nothing
they're
against them.
I think they're being depicted well as well. And I'm glad they're including them because if they didn't, in future episodes, it would get very confusing. So I am glad that
Yes.
they kept those in. And I think they're being depicted. I think I just maybe don't remember them as well, like Tim said. So I didn't know if anyone could give me clarification or not.
I don't remember, to be honest with you. It's been a minute since I read the books.
Yeah, but it's good they're including the pit because that's going to become very important later on. And then the other detail that I think that they've made a grave mistake in skipping over, they still haven't explained the tree in Camp Half-Blood.
They
Kind of.
skimmed over it. They talked about what the tree was, but they didn't talk about how it's this big shield, which is important for the
Book 2.
Hellhound, which they cut out, and book 2. I am glad they kept Thalia in, but again, it was skimmed over. I'm pretty sure in the movies they actually had a scene, like that's how it opens, is Thalia turning into a tree or something. But again, like Thalia was like a big part of Percy's mind because he was thinking, am I going to be turning into seaweed if something goes wrong? Is my dad even going to pay attention long enough to turn me into seaweed? And again, that played into Luke's character, which Luke is a huge character, and I'm just not sure how they're at Luke. A side character I want to talk about, I really liked Clarice. I don't know how you guys felt about her character. I was of the very unpopular opinion while reading the books that I liked her character a lot in the books, which I probably shouldn't have. But I think the actress who played her just did such a great job that even though she's like this camp bully, she's really cool, and I ended up really liking her character, and I think the actress who played her did such a phenomenal job with the time she was given. I'm really hoping this season gets renewed because she plays a very big role in the next season, and if it's renewed, I'll be super excited to see her in it.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with casting. I really, like you're saying, even if she is having pretty limited screen time, great actress to choose. And yeah, if they do come back with book two, it'll be cool seeing more of her in the future.
I would agree with that. Yeah, Clarice was probably the best side character thus far.
Yeah, we understand where she's coming from.
I think we'll understand it even more once we meet Ares a bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially seeing the father. What do you do to get that guy's attention? I did feel a bit bad for her when her spear broke. I was like, wow, imagining the only thing you ever got from your dad when he dared show any interest in you just being snapped in half. I don't care if Capture the Flag ended. I would have pummeled the kid. It broke my spear from my dad.
Yeah. Oh, I lose dessert privileges for a month.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I
that's
did like that
actually a
they
line straight
took
out
that
of the
from the
book
book.
too.
Yep. I appreciated that they kept that in.
Because it shows the mindset of this camp, where, like, trained toasters to survive, where with this electric spear, I'm gonna put you in the hospital, but oh, I guess I don't get my chocolate pudding or something. It's this completely different mindset that especially someone as a child of the god of war, who is probably even more in the battle mindset, would have, where they don't care. And it's just a different world. And I think that was a good introduction for Percy to have as he goes up against these bigger bullies, I guess you could call them, entering this new world where they don't care if you get hurt, kind of thing. And I did really like the fight scene with him and Clarice. I think that was done really well. Even though I was
With
like,
the
wow,
exception of it
Percy.
not ending in water.
Yeah, with the exception of it not ending in water, and the fact that Percy, being like an 11-year-old who had never held a sword before, I thought it was choreographed so well. I thought the actors made it believable. You could see Clarice's anger, you could feel Percy's fear. I really liked that scene, and overall, I just really loved his time at camp. Like we said, those episodes were just really well done, and it was a good introduction into this world.
What aspects or what would you like to see moving forward as we enter next week, as we enter the second half of the television show?
Okay, detail-wise, just for a small, minute detail, I really want to hear Ares call Hades corpse breath, and I want to hear him call Poseidon's CB brain.
Great.
I really want to hear him call him corpse breath.
Yeah, that'd be great. There was so much wittiness in the books that it would help bring that into the TV show as well. I forgot about Corpse Bride. I really am excited for the chauffeur if they
Okay.
do keep him in, because one of my favorite interactions in the book. I'll take whatever I can get.
Fair. I I was gonna say moving forward, I just want to see them really do justice for the quest they're on. I definitely want to have a good payoff, but also see this trio really having to rely on one another a lot more in these next few episodes. I think overall, I guess to wrap up my thoughts on the show so far, I do really feel like Disney has finally launched a great television show on Disney Plus that is not Marvel or Star Wars.
All right, so for wrapping up thoughts, I think it's a great show. Overall, all the acting is done very well. I've given up on Disney and Netflix TV shows, and then once in a while, one will pop up, then, oh, this is so good. And this is the first Disney show in about 2 or more years that I'm like, this is good. And I'm so glad it's getting all of the love. And I'm really excited for the last 4 episodes. I did just want to say one thing. I don't know if you guys have noticed during the closing credits scene, it's the art style is kind of a nod to like Greek sort of painting architecture stuff, but it's also the entire plot of the series. It's the entire first book played out in pictures.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's
because
cool.
I
oh,
watched it the first time too, and I was like, wait, they're giving everything away. But I thought it was really cool to see the whole storyline in these Greek painted figures. That was just one more nod that they did really well. Where I feel like a lot of time with a lot of TV shows lately, I just feel like they're not trying. And I felt like this TV show, they really put in the time with what they did to add those loving details. And that was one very loving detail that they didn't have to do, but they did. And it just showed the effort and the love put into this. And I'm really glad that especially Rick is able to see this and have the love for it.
That's a great point to bring up, Ruby, because when we were covering on the Cinema Club
Oh,
Secret Invasion,
You didn't like Secret Invasion?
I did not.
I thought it was good, but okay. We'll save that discussion for another time. I liked it.
I'm glad you got something good out of it, though. That's great.
out of it too, Tim.
I was just going to say, with the opening credits, they were utilizing, to some capacity at least, AI to create that opening sequence for the television show. So in stark contrast, that's great to hear that you're picking up on those super loving details put into the post credits of another Disney Plus show coming out a few months after Secret Invasion. So stark differences there when it comes to credits being created.
For my final wrap-up thoughts, one thing I forgot to mention, what I'm looking forward to most is seeing the underworld portrayed. I'm curious to see what they do with that stylistically, how it's portrayed. I'm very curious and very excited about that.
I didn't know if I
Okay.
could say that because I was like, is it a spoiler?
They're going to the underworld. We know that.
That's what they're trying to do. So that's what I'm probably most excited for. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good show. I'm not going to give it a great. I don't think I can fairly judge it until we see how everything plays out and see how much payoff we get for certain plot lines and how much of the door they leave open for season 2. I want to see what they do and how they do all of that before I can fairly judge it.
Yeah.
But
totally.
overall, I'd say if you like the books, give it a watch. Maybe your experience will be better than mine. I am enjoying it, but I've got a couple reservations with the show so far, and I would say definitely give it a shot.
Yeah. And if you're on the other end, if you're watching the show and haven't read the books, but are enjoying the show, definitely
go read the
give
books.
the book a try. Yeah.
Yeah.
100% read the book.
Definitely read the book.
Thank you both so much for meeting with me tonight to dive into the first 4 episodes of Percy Jackson, the Olympians. Excited to meet in about 4 or 5 weeks and dive into the last half.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for having us.
No, thank you for having us. I agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is fun. Let's do it
Indeed.
again soon.
All right.
Thank you so much for spending an hour with us as we dove into Percy Jackson and the Olympians today. I would encourage you, if you have not yet already done so, to join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC. And I am sure you're listening to this on the streaming platform of your choice, but just to make you aware of options, we are available on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, also YouTube now at the Cinema Club Podcast. If you would be interested in potentially being on the Cinema Club in the future, feel free to email us at the Cinema Club TCC@gmail.com. And finally, again, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you are loving the show, if you are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on our website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club. Thank you again so much, and we will see you on the next one.